book today. I get no royalties at all. But I don't want to cover that same material. Also, there's so many people who knew Fred in so many ways. I walked in here today and somebody from Olympia, Washington said, "Oh, Fred." And I said, "Was he up there?" Yeah. Somebody from Hawaii came in and said, "Oh, Fred." I said, "Was he from Hawaii?" "Oh, yeah, he was from that." He's from every place. So, the one thing that I would like to point out from my perspective, and that is, in this past year, when the fighting was going on in Iraq, there was a level of intensity in the hostilities which climaxed and went over the top with the bombing of the Golden Mosque in Samarra. And once the place of prayer went down, once the holy place went down, it was as if nothing was holy anymore. And when nothing is holy, society doesn't have anything to hold on to. There's no center. We break into civil war. We break into the family feud. There's nothing that we can turn to say, "I appeal," because once the sacred in our midst goes down in flames, it sets in motion something that is almost endlessly destructive until somebody, someplace, grabs something and says, there's going to be a new day with a new light and a new hope for the entire people. There's a scene in the Christian scripture. Jesus is hanging from a cross. Jesus is dying. Jesus is dead. And there was one man whose name was Joseph. He was from Arimathea, and he had been a member. He was a member of the Great Council. He was not involved he was not in favor of the crucifixion. He was a man of a good heart, well respected. And he went to see Pontius Pilate, and he said, "I'd like to have what's left. I'd like to have the body." And Pilate said, "I'll give you the body." So he took the body down from the cross, and he wrapped it in a shroud. And he and his companions walked off with the body. I can't help but just stop for a second and imagine what's going through the mind of this leader, this religious leader, who's walking away with a dead body of Jesus, putting it into a rock tomb. Fred McDonald goes through Europe, where the sacred has been bombed and bombed and bombed. And he reaches down and he picks up the shrouds, the shards, the little pieces of glass, whatever remains of the sacred in our midst. And he holds on to them. Because who knows, in the grace of God, what's going to be raised up? Who knows what kind of light is going to shine out of the darkness and through the darkness? Who knows of what kind of life is going to come from all that death? Joseph of Arimathea is the one person in the Bible that Fred McDonald reminds me most of. And I'm glad to be here today to say that.
I am the one who drove the chaplain up to this advance headquarters and sang, so you'll have to go back 62 years and hear my voice once again.
Now thank we all our God with heart and hands and voices, who wondrous things has done, in whom his world rejoices, who from our mother's arms hath blessed us on our way with countless gifts of love, and still is ours today.
Please stand up.
And ye were now turned, and had done right in my sight, in proclaiming liberty every man to his neighbor. Jeremiah 34:15. Many centuries ago, a prophet in Israel charged men with the duty of proclaiming liberty every man to his neighbor. No text can be more appropriate to this victory in Europe today. In the ages that lie between the sounding of Jeremiah's message and this day, the human family has suffered many wars and oppressions. Too frequently, the close of the wars have themselves established the oppressions. It is not difficult for us to imagine how incredibly frightful would be this day had our enemies won this war, had they established their own diktat peace, with its consequent Dachau, Buchenwald, and Nordhausen concentration camps in Connecticut, Kentucky, and California. Thank God the conflict ends with the victory for the United Nations. What a joy we can proclaim this victory day. Certainly we have every right to hope that liberties for all people will grow from the multitude of sacrifices that have been made. May this new era be a period of realization of the prophet's dream, when every man would proclaim proclaiming liberty to his neighbor. Reflective minds must watch with concern the course chosen by the delegates to the United Nations Conference in San Francisco. Here is the first step toward building victory into durable peace. Will we find in the world of tomorrow an international outlook with the breadth of vision and freedom that has characterized our country's growth? If not, we may find a world bearing more resemblance to Alcatraz, Prison Rock in San Francisco Harbor. Yet the thoughtful mind remembers that that is a choice with which we are always faced if we are free to choose. Victory has brought us freedom of choice and given the people of the earth real hope. Truly, that is cause for celebration. Days of war are hard times and breed many griefs. They are, too, times of testing and development of character. The reward that remains, however, is the peace. Surely today we may exchange for the spirit of heaviness the garment of joyful praise. Thank you.
This is an envelope, like others, that Fred collected. And in it is glass. On the front of it, it says Perrier, number 23. And here's the piece of glass. Reverend MacDonald collected glass shards from destroyed sanctuaries throughout Europe, and he would write a bit about that experience in his journal and on the pieces of paper that would accompany the envelopes. So we know the process of how he went about preserving these broken pieces of glass from houses of God, and a bit about how it was preserved and how he knew 50 years later where they all came from. But the bigger question to me was, why did he do it? Was he just a collector who picked up bits of something pretty to remember a walk or a favorite place that he might make a piece of jewelry out of or use as a paperweight? These pieces of glass are not particularly pretty in and of themselves. In the case of these glass shards, it seems that Reverend Fred MacDonald had a more wrenching need to pick up these pieces and remember where they came from. I think he tells us why in his journal about Verdun, France. And I'm quoting him here. Between the houses of the city center stands a modest Protestant church. Facing it on the hilltop on the right is the cathedral, some parts of which are as old as the 11th century. Near the entry gate, coming from the train station, is the synagogue. The fighting by the retreating Germans had been light, so what damage there was from World War I. I got pieces of glass from all three places. I attended a touching funeral service in the cathedral for about 30 persons whose mass grave had just been discovered. They had been rounded up and secretly executed by the Germans. The bugle calls for the dead echoed in my heart as I looked for the glass bits. And I want to repeat that. The bugle calls for the dead echoed in my heart as I looked for the glass bits. So this chaplain was remembering the dead, remembering man's inhumanity to man as he picked up these pieces of destroyed sacred places. The very sacred places where it is taught that we should love one another and heal the world. That these shards should be made into peaceful art is a fitting memorial to Reverend Fred MacDonald. Armel LaRue, the glass artist in charge of this project and a great friend of Fred's, will explain how the artists made the decisions.
Wonderful.